Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we're doing Epic History TV's Alexander the Great Part 3. Let's get into it.
In 334 BC, Alexander, 21-year-old ruler of the small Greek kingdom of Macedonia, led an invasion of the vast Persian Empire. It seemed impossible odds. But thanks to Greek military dominance and Alexander's fearless leadership, he won two great battles against the Persians, at the river Granicus and at Issus. Having subdued Persian lands west of the Euphrates River, he now headed east into the empire's heartlands, seeking a final showdown with the Persian king, Darius III. Receiving news that a great Persian army led by Darius had assembled at Gaugamela, near modern Mosul in Iraq, he made straight for it. This was Darius's last chance to stop Alexander, and Alexander's chance to smash Persian power once and for all. Darius had chosen to fight on open ground, where his advantage in numbers would be more telling. His soldiers had also worked hard to clear and flatten the terrain to make it suitable for Persian war chariots. By modern estimates, the Persian army was between 50 and 80,000 strong, and made up of contingents from across the empire. Infantry from Syria and Babylonia, cavalry from Armenia, India, and Central Asia, up to 200 scythed chariots, even a handful of war elephants. Alexander's army was smaller, and may have been outnumbered by as much as 2 to 1. He deployed his units in their usual formation. On the left flank, Thracian and Thessalian cavalry, commanded by Parmenion. In the centre, the Macedonian veterans of the phalanx, each armed with their 18-foot sarissa pike. On the right flank, Alexander with his elite cavalry, the companions, and his best infantry, the hypaspists. These were the units with which Alexander planned to launch his main attack. Greek hoplites formed a second line and supported both wings, which were angled back to guard against encirclement by the Persians. The battle began when Alexander led his wing out to the right, a move that took the Persians by surprise. Could Alexander really be trying to encircle their huge army? The Persians mirrored his movement, taking troops away from their center to outflank Alexander and prevent him leaving the area they'd cleared for the Persian chariots. But Alexander's unusual maneuver was a trap to entice the Persians to weaken their center. When he saw...
So in these ancient battles, what you'll see a lot of times, this is kind of, a lot of people think this is kind of the boring part of ancient military and ancient battles, but there's a lot of moves and counter moves before the battle starts. So you'll have one side get in a certain alignment, and then the other side, seeing that alignment, will start shifting troops here or there. Then the other side, in response to that, will shift troops again. And it's just this back and forth, trying to get into a position where basically the battle is already decided before the battle even really starts. However, in some cases, and you see this with either armies that are tactically not as great, or in this case with Alexander, where the situation more is he wants to get them off-footed. He wants to kind of feint them into making a mistake. So what you'll see is this immediate, right when the battle starts, all-out charge of one part of the army or another. What that does is that causes the opposing side to immediately start making decisions without really thinking through all of the tactical consequences of the decision that's being made. You see this a lot in ancient history where a battle starts very quickly and neither side really has the ability to do the maneuvering or be able to kind of build up to the battle. But if you already have a plan going into it, this actually puts you at a great advantage because you already know that you're going to do this. The other side does not.
Or that it had worked, he ordered his Greek cavalry to charge, to keep the Persians fixed in position. A giant cavalry battle developed on the right wing. Darius, meanwhile, judging this to be the decisive moment, unleashed his chariots. But expert Agrianes javelin throwers took out horses and crews, while the Greek infantry opened lanes, allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through. Now Alexander led his companion cavalry and parts of the Macedonian phalanx in a headlong charge, straight at the weakened Persian centre, fighting his way towards Darius himself. The sudden ferocity of Alexander's assault threw the Persians into panic. The centre of the army broke and ran, King Darius himself leading the rout.
So again, at this point, the Greeks had this saying, I talked about it in another video, they believed that the god Phobos ran the battlefield. The god of Phobos is the Greek god of fear. The idea being that once a side breaks and runs, that's it. And then you have to put yourself in that position. Even if you have the courage to stay there and fight, what if the person next to you breaks and runs? What do? What if the person next to him breaks and runs? So now two of them have gone. How many of them are going to break and run before you decide, I'm not going to be the last one here, or one of the last 10 or 100 here? So that's what happens. When one side starts to break and run, it generally causes an all-out rout where the entire line breaks and runs. Again, I talked about this in the other one, but this is when the casualties really start to mount up.
But Alexander's left wing was in serious trouble. Parmenion, facing a huge onslaught by Persian cavalry, was virtually surrounded. Indian and Scythian horsemen had even ridden through a gap in the Greek line. But rather than wheeling and attacking the Greeks from behind, they'd carried straight on to loot their camp. Parmenion sent a desperate appeal to Alexander for help. The king abandoned his pursuit of Darius, regrouped, and charged the Persian right wing. It was the hardest and bloodiest fighting of the battle, claiming the lives of 60 of Alexander's companions.
Like I said in the other video, Alexander has historically low casualties in these battles. So 60 of the companions dying is actually a big deal. That's a lot in the context of Alexander's forces.
Finally, as news of Darius's flight spread across the battlefield, the last Persian horseman turned and fled. The Battle of Gaugamela was a stunning and complete victory for Alexander. According to ancient sources, he lost just a few hundred men, while the Persians lost thousands. Alexander had routed Darius's great army, and now the road to Babylon, the empire's main capital, lay open. The Macedonian king entered the great city in triumph, recognized by Persian officials as its new rightful ruler. So too at the city of Susa, where Alexander ceremonially took his seat upon the royal throne of Persia. In the Zagros Mountains, at a pass known as the Persian Gates, a courageous Persian force held up Alexander's army for a month. The Greeks eventually found a mountain path that bypassed their position, allowing them to encircle and wipe out the defenders. In early 330 BC, Alexander reached Persepolis, the empire's ceremonial capital. Alexander wanted to appear as a liberator to the Persians, as a legitimate successor to King Darius. But now he ordered Persepolis to be pillaged and burnt. Retribution for the Persian invasion of Greece and the burning of Athens' sacred temples in 480 BC. Alexander now headed north into Media, where Darius had taken refuge in the royal city of Ecbatana. Alexander was determined to capture Darius, but the fugitive king fled east, in the hope of raising a new army in the provinces of Parthia, Bactria, and Sogdia. It was not to be. As Alexander closed in, the Persian king was murdered by one of his own governors, Bessus, who then proclaimed himself the empire's new ruler. Alexander gave orders for Darius to be buried in the royal tombs of Persepolis, alongside his ancestors. Then he paused to organize his vast new empire. Alexander appointed viceroys to rule the provinces on his behalf, keeping several Persians who had sworn loyalty in their posts. Then he resumed his march east, his goal to find and kill the usurper Bessus, subjugate the empire's eastern provinces, and reach the far edge of the world. Research.
Okay, so one of the things that, before we go, is a really interesting conversation to me. Historians go back and forth on whether Macedonia would have had the ability to take Persia if Macedonia itself had not been subjugated under Persia and kind of seen the way that they ran the empire, seen the state building process, been able to mimic some of those things themselves. If that did not build Macedonia up into the state that could at some point actually overthrow and then take Persia itself, that would be very ironic if true. If the Persian conquering of Macedonia is what actually allowed Macedonia to grow into the state that would then come back and conquer Persia, that is huge historical irony. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. This is Epic History TV's Alexander the Great Part 3. Like, comment, subscribe. Keep helping me build the channel over here, and I will see you guys next time.